Good morning. This is Saturday morning, August 26th, 2017. Welcome. Just wanted to do a quick video today about the topic of Islamic migration. Okay. Now, my purpose in this topic is to sort of help explain what we see going on in Europe and in Canada, and of course soon to come to the United States. It is inevitable. Okay, so what am I talking about exactly when I say the words Islamic migration? Well, let's take a look at history. Now, Islam is unique in that its date of birth does not start with the death or the birth of its prophet Muhammad. Now, most other religions in the world, and again, I want to make a disclaimer real quick before we get into this topic. I am not an expert on theology. Okay, I did study it quite extensively. I was raised in a fundamentalist Christian cult. I have never been a believer. Inside, I have been an atheist my entire life. Because that is the only consistent worldview that I've yet to discover. Okay? Now, who knows? Maybe later on down the road I'll stumble on enlightenment or, get religion, but I kind of doubt it. Kind of doubt it. So, now most religions, and again, considering that I'm not a theologian, I'm not an expert on Islam, but yes, I have studied some of the doctrine of Islam. I've gotten a lot of information from actual experts on Islam. So anything I'm saying in this video, nothing I am saying in this video is anything that hasn't been said before. Everything I'm going to talk about has already been covered by experts. So if you have a disagreement with anything I say, I welcome that. Because I could very well be wrong about some of the things I'm about to talk about here regarding Islamic migration. So, enough of that disclaimer. Let's just go ahead and jump into it. Now, most religions, as far as I understand, do develop a calendar of sorts. Okay, we have Christianity with the Roman calendar. Thank goodness we don't have to use Roman numerals. We can thank Arab culture, ancient Arab culture, for the numeric system that we have today. That's right. We use Arabic numerals, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 9, right? 0, starting with 0. Now imagine having to write 2017 and write it out in Roman numerals. It's going to be quite long, right? So you're going to have, 12 characters worth of written text to get through before you can just spell the date 2017. That's not even including today's date and the month, right? But with Roman numerals, with Arabic numerals, it's pretty easy. It just takes 4 characters and a total of 6 characters to spell out the day, the month, and the year. Simple. So we do have that as a result of Arabic culture, not necessarily of Islam. Now, let's go ahead and talk about that starting point of the birth of Islam. Now, in previous videos, we've discussed the fact that Islamic doctrine is, number one, ethically dualistic. In other words, Islam is a religion of peace, and simultaneously it is also a religion of conquest, civilizational conquest to be specific. Okay? Now, you can think of the phrase in the Quran that talks about peace, and I can't remember the verse. I wish I could quote the verse. The copy's right over there. I should just go pick it up. But nah. When they talk about peace, when Muslims and Islam talks about peace, it is only in the context of there being nothing else but Islam. And then you have peace. So as long as Christianity, Buddhism, atheism exists, as long as there is a person alive who adheres to anything else except for Islam alone, then there can be no peace, right? So peace comes only after there is nothing else in existence except Islam. So that's the first point I want to make. So that will help you distinguish in your mind what people are talking about when they start talking about the so-called religion of peace. Yes, they're technically correct, but they don't understand the nuance of just exactly what that means. So there, now you have that nuance. So let's start from the birth of Muhammad. Now we know that Muhammad was an orphan. His father died before he was born, and his mother died shortly after, and he was adopted by a relative and grew up, became a shepherd. To make a long story short, we have the Quran in two parts. Now this points to the ethical dualism of Islam. Okay, the first part of the Quran is in Mecca, right? So this was Muhammad's effort to spread the religion of peace, as it's understood today, right? The peaceful Islam. Okay, he was not successful. He spent about a decade doing this, and by the time he was done, he had about 150 followers. Not very impressive for a self-proclaimed prophet. I mean, we get modern-day charlatans that can get 150 suckers to buy something from them in about 10 minutes. So, if you look at it that way, he was just pathetically unsuccessful. Okay? Now, what did he do when he realized that his methods weren't working? Well, he packed up and he moved to Medina. Now, that is the starting point of Islam, of the birth of Islam. The Islamic calendar doesn't start with the death of Muhammad or even with the birth of Muhammad. The Islamic calendar starts when Muhammad packed up and went to Medina. Now, so earlier I mentioned you have two Qurans. Okay? The Quran on its own is kind of convoluted, it's not consistent, and it's not chronological. Okay, so there's no chronological order, and we know that from Surah 9, which is the Medinan Quran. And it's thrown in there in the first third of the book, right? So you have some Mecca, and then all of a sudden, boom, Surah 9, you have Medina. And then once Surah 9 is done, then you're flipping back to Mecca. And then later on in the Quran, it flips back to Medina. So there's no chronological order. And this is done intentionally. It's not to deliberately confuse, it's to present the topics in such a way that the reader will understand and absorb something called the law of abrogation. Okay? That is unique to Islam. It means that the latter verse is more powerful than the first verse. So, as an example, let's say that Muhammad had said, I don't think he ever did, but let's imagine that Muhammad said at one point, love thy neighbor as thyself, okay? But then later he goes on and says, kill thy neighbor. Okay, so somebody reading that might get confused and go, well, what do I do? Do I love my neighbor or do I kill my neighbor? Well, what did he say first and what did he say last? If he said, love thy neighbor first, and then he later on down the road comes back and says, kill thy neighbor, then you go with kill thy neighbor. That's the law of abrogation. The latter verse carries more weight than the former verse. Okay, so now we understand what the law of abrogation does and why the Quran is not in a chronological order. Nor is the Quran the complete doctrine of Islam. You need the biography of Muhammad, and you need the traditions and teachings of Muhammad in order to complete the Islamic doctrine. Now, there's a lot of debate on whether Islamic doctrine is in those three texts or if it's in two texts that are combined with the hadiths and Muhammad's biography. I don't know. That part is pretty unimportant to me. The main idea I want to get across is what Islam really is all about. Now, when Muhammad picked up from Mecca and traveled to Medina, that's the starting point of the Islamic calendar. And the reason it's the starting point of the Islamic calendar is Muhammad's motivation for moving to Medina. He wanted to spread Islam, but he was going to employ different methods altogether to spread Islam. And those methods we now know as jihad. Okay? Now, what is the act of packing up and moving to another land for the purpose of conducting civilization jihad. That word is called Hijra. It's Islamic migration. You can look it up on Google. It'll tell you all about it. Now, what do we see happening in Europe today? A mass Islamic migration. One giant Hijra. Absolutely, undeniably, that is what that is. Okay? And Muslims know this. Those Muslims that you see packing up, leaving their homelands, whether or not you want to believe they're fleeing from war-torn stuff and they're just trying to save themselves and get to a safer place, or whether, like me, you believe that inside they understand exactly what they're doing. It's the time. Now is the time for the Islamic migration. Yes, in 2017. Now, no, this doesn't just happen overnight, and it doesn't happen in, such a short amount of time. It does take years, and that makes sense because we're talking millions and millions of people. Logistically, you just can't move millions and millions of people from one location to another location like that. It just doesn't work. They understand this, and that's why you see a slow but steady and ever-increasing flow of Muslims into the West. They are invading. They are invading us. They are the enemy. They are, in their own minds, justified in invading your lands because this is what Muhammad did. He conducted jihad after his migration from Mecca to Medina. Now, after the 13 years or so that he spent in Medina, he committed an act of jihad once a month, approximately. And by the time he died, after having moved to Medina, every Arab in the region was a Muslim. Not just a few people here or there, but every single Arab in the region was a Muslim. Now, we can get into another video on just how he accomplished this, but I wanted to do this video to explain to people when they witness or when they look at the refugee crisis and scratch their heads and wonder what in the world is going on. Can it really be all that bad for all these people? Because the vast majority of them, in case you haven't noticed, happen to be fighting age males. Not women and children. Fighting age males. Okay? And are they decimated? Are they emaciated? Do they look hungry to you? No. No. They're in good shape. They're ready for a fight. And they're coming here to pick one with you. So wake up. Understand what it is you're looking at and understand the motivation and the history behind it. It's called Hijra. And after that comes civilization jihad. Thank you for watching.